Hi, everybody. This is Tom Riddle from Virtual Intelligence Briefing. I'm the Director of Research and New Customer Programs. Thank you for joining us today for another edition of the VIB Success Series. Today, Women in Marketing, Career Advancement Strategies and Advice. And so with that today, let's have our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Jen McAdams.
Great. Hi, Tom. Jen McAdams. I work on demand generation and field marketing at Progress Software. Just a little bit about myself. I started my career going way back in college to Northeastern. I went to the co-op program where you're working half the year and in school half the year. So proud to say that I graduated with a resume and a business suit. And then from there, just advanced through working mostly in software and hardware companies, so technology companies in marketing. I've had great experience in being able to work for large brands like Cisco and SAP, also some smaller brands. I find that my perfect size is where I am right now, kind of a mid-sized company like Progress, where we have a number of portfolios, a lot of things to work on. And I'm happy to be here today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carolyn Stern, and I'm Vice President of the Americas region and Global Channel Marketing for Sophos, a cybersecurity company. I, like Jen, have had quite a few different stops along the way in my journey here. I've got over 20 years working in technology, and I know we're talking a little bit about marketing today and technology, but I actually started my career in sales and moved over into marketing. And in marketing, I've had most of the roles, from product marketing to competitive intelligence, analyst relations, content development. I do find that I am happiest in a demand role that aligns really strong and tightly to business goals. And also, like Jen, I've worked in teams of every size, from literally being the third hire in a small startup to working in some of the largest global technology companies. I'm historically happiest or most comfortable working in smaller organizations, though I've really enjoyed my time at Sophos. And my time at Sophos is the absolute longest span I've taken in a single company. And I like to say that part of the reason is every couple of years, it's really changed and been dynamic enough that it has renewed its challenge for me. But most specifically, I think my elements are that I really like to find a place where I'm working with a team I'm motivated by. So I think that's kind of one of my pieces of advice is to, first of all, find the work that you genuinely enjoy, that you are able to be your most authentic self. And then for me, it was really important to find the team that I found both challenging and inspiring. So very happy to be here with all of you today. It's been fun getting to meet these amazing ladies and talk about their career path and progression, and happy to have the conversation with the broader audience.
Hi, my name is Robin Capputo. I'm Chief Marketing Officer for a company called DataVale. We're an IT services company with about 1,000 employees. I'm on a 38-year career. I just turned 60 and very proud of that number. But I've worked for 3 companies in those 38 years, which I know is a little bit of an anomaly. But the important part is the first company I worked with, a $10 billion company, was able to move around in a lot of different positions in PR, marketing, regulatory, and learn a lot of different facets. And then started to narrow down and focus in, and worked for a $1 billion company as head of marketing. And then now where I'm at, a $100 million company from a CMO standpoint. What I found I enjoy the most is where I can have a direct impact on growth. I think that's really a mantra that marketers in this new world have to focus on, is growth and the direct impact that you can have on the financial success of a company. Because tangible results matter as much as attitude, aptitude, but demonstrating tangible results. So very eager to chat with everyone, learn. I find that to keep growing and learning throughout your career is really key as well. So happy to be
Great.
here.
Thank you, Robin. And I'd like to make an introduction, special introduction to Zena Seaton, who today, I should say, is in Austin, Texas today. So hopefully your internet connection will work well through the session. And Zena, just thanks again very much for being able to make it today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And sorry that I come to you looking like this today, but as Carolyn said, ahead of us having all of you join us, marketing people just do what needs to get done. So I'm proof of that here today as I sit here in my cold house with my hoodie on, coming to you with icicles off of my roof and another 3 inches of snow expected today. Who thought I would say that mid-February in Texas? I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. My career did not start in marketing, nor have I spent the majority of my career in marketing. I've spent the majority of my career in customer offices, customer support, university, professional services roles, really ensuring that my customers have the experience that my company intends them to have, and be successful with our software. So now I'm in marketing, heading that charge as VP of Customer Experience for Blue Prism. We are also a global company, about 1,000 employees. And I get asked a lot, what is customer experience? And customer experience is really the culmination of all the interactions that a business or a user has with your company. And when you look at it from tip to toe, as I like to say, the moment that someone sits down and types in what is, cybersecurity, what is robotic process automation in my case, that's when their experience with my company Blue Prism begins. And that's why it is so important that customer experience be a marketing function, and why we as marketeers really focus in on ensuring that customers' experience is being thought about, that we are design thinking our approaches to how we build customer journeys and how we ensure that they'll be successful with our products. So I do have a technical background in that I am from Texas, Houston originally. So I studied chemistry, thinking I would go into the oil and gas industry, which I did, but as a seller. So I sold into the oil and gas and chemical industry for a few years before I moved to Austin. And that's when I jumped into the world of computers and software. And here I find myself some odd years later, not quite as many as Robin, but I'm just right there behind you. So
Right.
very happy to be here today with all of you.
Myself as well. So let's start with our first question. Carolyn, what best practices have you employed to grow your career?
So I think one of the interesting ways of thinking about the answer to this question is it's really easy to sit here at this point in my career and look backwards on it and tell you, oh, it was very intentional. And these are all the steps I consciously took to grow my career. That would be a bit disingenuous. So for those of you that are earlier in your career, I think my honest answer to it is, I don't know that I did. I don't know that I proactively grew my career as much as I found myself in situations where I was challenged and able to, as Robin says so well, really align to the goals of the business. So my career developed somewhat organically because of those two factors of motivation that I was drawn to. One is the problem solving of technology. I just loved. When I first started working in technology, I was planning on biding my time before I headed off to law school. I learned really quickly the satisfaction of being able to talk to a customer back when I was in sales and have them say, this is all of the stuff I'm struggling with, and being able to say, oh, I've got an answer to that problem. I actually loved that. From there, it was about the teams. So though I don't have the career that looks like Robin's of 3 different companies over the course of a couple of decades, I have quite a few companies on my resume. But what's hidden inside that view of it is it's almost always the certain members of teams that I've worked with before. So I have moved through my career by following team members that I'd worked with previously in various companies. And that worked really well for me for a long time. I hooked myself up with really smart and intelligent and challenging people who were looking at complex problems that the world was facing and how technology could help to solve it, and grew organically with that group. At some point, though, I did have to really start to actively manage my career and understand what that looked like. And the best advice I got about that was to step out of a passive engagement of my career development and really move into an advocacy step, which was if I thought I could just sit in a large company and work away and let my results speak for itself, and someone was going to, tap me on the shoulder and say, here's your next most amazing job. Uh, I really was able to receive some great advice that said that's just not how it works. What you need to be doing is looking for ways that you can continue to perform. That is step one. Do your job and exceed your performance. Know exactly what is expected of you by your management team and how they're going to be looking at your performance. If you're not getting that engagement with your manager, ask for it and look to build that. And once you have a really clear understanding of what the company and your team is looking for you to perform, as you're hitting and exceeding those goals, look for effective and authentic ways to advocate and share those successes within the company so that when you're learning something, either failing fast or learning something that works, you're also sharing that success within the company. It's therefore giving you advocacy and raising your profile, but also putting you in a position where you might be able to have influence and impact beyond the core of your role. I think that advice was the most effective for me. Once I had sort of run to the end of the rope of, hey, if I just do an amazing job and work really hard and become that person that everybody always wants on their team, how do I get to the next level? And that advocacy and that intentionality was probably the biggest difference for me.
And Robin, what were the best practices you've employed to grow your career?
Well, Carolyn, some of the stuff that you said absolutely resonates, right? It's results matter, right? Attitude matters. Passion about the quality of your work matters, and people notice. And that's something you have control over. But then my moves to the two moves that I made within companies were following a CEO that I had done a good job for, right? That from a results orientation. And two of the lovely ladies that work on my team right now have worked for me in 3 different companies since 1992. I not only took advantage of that, but also doing that for other women in my company. So the other thing I've never said in my entire life, that's not in my job description, right? And I have heard that from other folks, right? And that's just, I can't imagine ever saying that. Being a team player, even with those people that you don't get along with, because that's just life, right? You've got to figure out how to do that. Cultivating cross-functional team, not just within marketing, but cross-functional, demonstrating how you can make their job easier, how marketing makes a difference to the overall company. And then the last thing I would say is help your boss, right? I often would go in early in my career, figure out what was stressing out my boss and go in and take that off of his or her plate. And I had a boss who used to throw pencils into the ceiling. And that was a indicator of how stressed out he was, right? So I would come in and take things off his plate, and that matters too, right? And those are simple things you can do every day.
Thank you for that. And Jen, what if your best practices been or your insights you could share with the audience about how you've grown your career?
So I think both Carolyn and Robin touched on it, both in terms of themselves, but also now at a manager level, how they're looking at their teams. But for me, when I've been most successful advancing my career, it's when I had a manager who believed in me and had my back. And there were times, I think I shared with you guys previously that I was at Cisco for 12 years. And as Robin says, in some of these bigger organizations, you have an opportunity to try different functions and different disciplines within marketing. So similar, I had a role in product marketing, I had a role in marketing operations, landed in campaigns and demand gen, which I love. But in that time, there were times when I would say, I think my boss cares more about my career than I do. Like she had it plotted out for me, which was great. But I also think on the flip side of that, sometimes what I look at or struggle with some of my team members is, you have to also be your own best advocate, because while I had that, and hopefully others are lucky enough too to have managers who are looking out for them, you might not always. And if you're not looking out for your own career, who is going to do that for you? So I think there's definitely some aspect of, as Carolyn said, being your best advocate, and as Robin said too, like looking for the gaps that need to be filled. What are the pain points, and do I have the skill set to fix them? And if not, can I acquire those skills?
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, Jen. And Gina, yourself, and I think what we could say for yourself, one of the success strategies is being able to show up today.
It is
So,
important
yeah.
that you show up. Yeah, these ladies have definitely shared already so many best practices and insights. I'm not sure that I really have a lot to add, but to maybe reinforce a few points, take initiative. Lots of different ways to say that, but so important when you see things that aren't being done, or things that could be done in a better way, or when you see someone struggling, whether it's your boss or a colleague, or maybe even an employee, take that initiative to reach out and to help them. I like to call it have a service heart. The more that you have a service heart, the better that you are. You have to remember that your next promotion might not come from someone already above you. And so it's very important. I've had great opportunities given to me by, a kid's parents who were on my kids' softball team, as an example. So never block yourself off from new opportunities, and never think, oh, a new opportunity can't come through an avenue that I've not already established, or that's not already a career avenue, right? Because it can be a personal friend, or an outside associate that can bring an opportunity, or a new career opportunity your way. I think another best strategy or practice that I've employed is to always try to have joy and fun in whatever it is I'm doing. And maybe that's often a best practice for moving away from something than to move into something. But, don't be afraid to make a mistake. If you take an opportunity and you find a little while into it that it's not working out for you, it's okay to say, this isn't for me. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean that you're bad at it even. I was really, really good at sales. I started my career in sales too. And you know what? It wasn't suited for me, because then once they became a customer, they took them away from me and I didn't get to deal with them anymore. And that made me really sad. So, you can be good at something and still not want to do it. And I think that is a really interesting way to look at a best practice, right? It's not what you should do, but it's actually, don't go into anything thinking this is the end game, right? You can always have somewhere to go from that. And so on that point, it's very important, I think, to map out your trajectory. Every new career step you take, understand how it fits on your career trajectory. While you might not know where the ultimate end point is, as long as you're on a journey and as long as you continue to move yourself forward, then that's what you're doing. You're moving forward, you're not stagnating. And that's always a positive thing for your career.
Thank you very much for that, Zena. I loved what you said about joy, by the way. I think that's such an important ingredient to love what you do. And so, Jen, next question is, how do you advocate and mentor for other women in your company?
I think it's a great question, Tom. And some of what we talked about a little bit in our prep for this session was, in giving career advice specifically to women, or women in marketing, how is it different than maybe our male peers? And I have to say that I think some of the studies and statistics that you'll see now about the way that women approach jobs and job opportunities, and I think we're seeing it in some of the comments and questions coming through in the chat, the way some women aren't comfortable, tooting their own horn, or just are more introverted or more, I don't want to say more humble, but, in essence, yes. So I think that looking out for those folks on the team, and again, as folks are saying, cross-functionally, that are shining, that are stars, and talking them up. And I think that it doesn't have to be a formal pact, of course, but some of the questions are, how do you get people to talk you up behind closed doors? I think we've touched on it a bit, is performance. If you're doing a good job, that should rise up. But I think as female leaders on this call, we should be looking out for the folks also who may be just starting out, or maybe at a middle level of their career, and also are providing exceptional performance, and speaking out and calling that out purposefully. So I think we have a role to play as leaders in doing that, and informally within your network, within your organization. I don't think that you should feel shy about reaching out to other women and saying, I'd like to get to this next step, but how can I get there? Can you help me? What do you see that I should be doing in order to get there?
Great. Thank you very much for that. One of the things I want to mention, folks, is we've got a ton of questions that have come in through the Q&A. Our panelists are working to answer those questions through the Q&A portal, and hopefully we'll be able to get to most of those, answer most of those. And if we don't, every single question will be followed up afterwards. So thank you very much for that, Jen. And Robin, how do you advocate and mentor for women in your organization?
That's it's an interesting question when I see several people asking about the having trouble advocating for yourself. So I absolutely think it's imperative as leaders that when things go wrong, I take the blame. When things go well, you give the credit, right? Because the buck stops here, right? And I think that's one important way, is that you give credit where credit is due. I think one of the things my team has told me is that I believe more in them than they believe sometimes in themselves. And Jen, you had mentioned something to that effect. And advocating for your team, pushing your team to reach new levels, try new things, and raising the bar, right? And then helping them get there. The other point, I think, is that this leading by example, right? Encouraging the team to take risks, take the hard jobs, do them well, and then make sure that working with your boss, that you get the credit for doing that job well.
Great, thank you for that, Robin. And Gina, I'm going to ask you kind of a variant of that question, which is, how do you advocate for and mentor other women, not only within your company, but within women in RPA, women in robotics process automation?
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the ways that my company, all the women at my company have really tried to outreach to the industry and embrace bringing women into the industry, as well as promoting their success within it. So robotic process automation is the field that my company Blue Prism is in. And in 2019, we launched an initiative called Women in RPA. And one of the reasons why we did this is because we find that about half of the heads of the robotic process automation centers of excellence within our customer base are women. So we had already identified that it was an awesome opportunity for the skill sets that women naturally bring to bear in those roles. And so really providing a mouthpiece to be their cheerleader. I've heard a lot of the women, I've heard a lot of women say, and heard echoed here today, that women have a hard time promoting themselves. Now, I can honestly say that is not a problem I have. I am very happy to stand up and talk about how amazing, great, and wonderful I am, and take all for everything. So I don't have that problem. But I was also raised by a single father. So when I hear people say, how are you comfortable being the only woman in the room? I've always been the only woman in the room since I was 7. So it feels so natural to me, but I realize that it doesn't to other women, which is another major force factor in putting together women in RPA. So we specifically reach out to women within the company, within the community, and we run events specifically targeted at them to help them learn new skills, to help them learn about the environments and the career opportunities. We have different sessions. So we do things called Empower Hour, where we poll our community and we say, what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about gender pay gap? All right, that's a tough thing to talk about, but let's talk about it. You want to talk about how to succeed in a male, quote, male dominated industry? Okay, let's talk about that. And one of the things that I'm very pleased about is that we have about 20% of our members, which we're about 2,700 members today, we have about 20% of our members are men. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that we tend to think this is a woman's promoting women is a woman thing, but it's an everybody thing. And when our male colleagues will get on board and actually begin to act on our behalf is when we see a lot of change happening. So I encourage all of our fellow male colleagues out there to start promoting the women in the organization as well, because it's not only about us being our own cheerleader or our manager being our cheerleader. It's really about everyone in the company advocating for everyone in the company to get the recognition they deserve.
Great, thank you. And Carolyn, how do you advocate for and mentor other women in your company? And also, you'd mentioned you mentor outside of your company as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'd love, again, all the comments that we're hearing from the other leaders, because I feel like I could nod and agree with so much of what I'm hearing, and the questions that are coming in from the panel. It's hard to pivot. Actually, there's so many amazing questions, but I think Jen's point is about, once we are finding ourselves in positions of leadership, what is our commitment and our cadence about managing the teams in such a way that leaves that fluidity for different types of personalities to be able to be recognized and comfortable. At a formal level, from a mentoring perspective, we have a program inside my company, which I've been thrilled to be a part of. I've learned the difference between mentoring and coaching. I'm not sure I'm nailing either one of them perfectly. We engage in a regular mentoring session. And this, one of the individuals that came to mind, I mentor a female who's in the sales organization, and I'm beginning to mentor a male who's in the product development on the technology side. And one of the things that the stories that came to mind as I was reading some of the questions that said things like, what if I'm not comfortable advocating for myself? Or what if I'm an introvert? Or what if I don't like my boss? Or I don't know what's next for me? How do I do these in a world that isn't necessarily perfectly laid out for me? And the exercise I went through with this individual was to spend a little time uh, auditing her story. How did she get to where she is today? What is it about the job that she does today she thinks she is uniquely strong at? What is it that she does about the job she uniquely enjoys? And we talked a little bit about her whole career progression, and a theme and a picture starts to form about where her strengths are. And then starting to look at the business and engaging in conversations with people in your direct organization, or if you don't have a relationship with your manager that feels really natural to do that, finding those allies outside your direct line of command. The one piece of advice I give you on that, though, is try to work through your manager. So instead of saying, I'm uncomfortable with my manager, I'm going to reach out to this other person and engage in a side conversation, try to say to your manager, I'm really interested in exploring my career path. I've got some questions. I want to learn a little bit more about the company. My thought is I wanted to reach out to person A, B, or C. Does that sound good to you? Because what you're doing there is you're just providing a healthy amount of respect to your chain of command, so that the person that is currently your direct manager can be in a position to be your advocate and pull you through. But you're also exploring the fact that there might be other relationships you're more comfortable engaging with, more personalities that you feel more natural. As we started to talk through her profile of what was it about her that she was intrinsically motivated, that where her work and herself really met positively and powerfully, the roles about what could come next for her really started to emerge. Now, there wasn't necessarily a job waiting for her, right? That it, just because you might be ready to take the next step in your career doesn't mean the company you work for will have that opportunity at that moment in time. But what it did meant was it provided some really practical ways for this individual to start to reach out to people who, when those roles open up, would be in those teams. Start to make introductions to those people, share with them a little bit about what they've been working on, private one-to-one conversations. This doesn't mean you have to stand up in the middle of an all company, all hands and declare yourself the most amazing contributor in the team. There are different ways you can build that advocacy for yourself that might feel more comfortable if you are introverted. And I'll come back to what Robin said a billion times over is tie it to the business goals. One of the challenges and some of the other questions that have come in have been things like, if I'm early in my career and I just feel like they're dumping a bunch of administrative work on me and I'm drowning in this, I don't see how I'm ever going to get in trouble with this. What would you do? I think you always want to understand the why. And the more you can understand the why, it can help you frame the challenges you're experiencing to your managers, such that, hey, I know you've got me working on this massive amount of manual lead work because there's, you went to a trade show and you have 3,000 leads and you need me to do lead cleansing. Like, I think everyone's nodding because we still have the carpal tunnel from doing it in our lives. That happens all the time. And some of what you might be feeling could be legitimate. It could be genuine that you are being dumped on, but some of it also could be the fact that that's where you are in your career. But if you can see how it fits into the bigger picture, it's easier to spend those hours doing that work because you understand the why and how that that garbage in, garbage out element of lead management and lead cleansing is critically important to the program's investment success. And so sometimes I think it's looking outside yourself when you feel like you're the victim in the role and understanding what's happening in the business around you. It doesn't mean you're not the victim, but it may mean that you're looking at it only through a single point of view. I don't know if that helps to answer some of the questions. There's so many that are coming in. I don't know if we're going to get them typed up fast enough.
Thank you very much for that, Carolyn. And now, Robin, another question is, sales teams are often male-driven. What are some of the best practices to build bridges between the sales and marketing functions?
So the number one piece of advice I can give to marketers to build a stronger bridge with sales is carry a number that matters. Salespeople have quotas. They live and die by those quotas. Marketing needs to have quotas that matter. And for us, it means 90% of new logos come from marketing generated leads, and a percentage of the pipeline and closed deals come from marketing generated leads. Now, we all know there's a lot of other metrics we have to look at, but at the end of the day, what matters to the company, right, is that contribution to growth. And the minute you start doing that, salespeople look at you differently, right? And they, and because you're carrying a number, you can also hold them accountable, right, for pursuing those leads that you find for them, because you're trying to find the quality leads that close, not just a glamour metric, right? Brand matters, right? But how do you take brand awareness and say this is exactly how it contributes to growth, right? Instead, it's for us as a smaller company, it is that kind of bookings metric that really has made a difference.
Great. Thank you very much, Robin. And Gina, same question again. Sales teams are often male-driven. What are some of the best practices to build bridges between sales and the marketing function?
Well, so I started my career in sales, as I mentioned, and I think that gives me an appreciation for what sellers go through on a day-to-day basis. And I realize that we're sitting back here at the ranch, as I like to say, being from Texas, and they're out there, street fighting with the knives out every day, trying to win deals. So I think we have to at first understand and appreciate the situation that they're in the field and what they're being bombarded with, and we have to have a service mentality towards them in the field. But I also think we have to hold them accountable. When you let salespeople get away with too much, then salespeople just, they'll, as you say, give an inch, they take a mile. And so I think it's an equal accountability between both parties. So, Robin, yes, you have to have a goal that you're accountable to. You have to have a certain set of metrics that you're accountable to. but you also have to push back and hold your sellers accountable as well.
Mhm.
And I think when that relationship gets solidified, and when you realize that, when they realize that you're going to do for them, and the more they do for you, the more you do for them, it creates a very good symbiotic relationship. And I have a unique role on the team here. I'm the customer experience, so I focus more on customer and expansion and penetration than I do on net new logo acquisition. And so that's a good position for me to be in, because my sellers are often wanting to come to me to understand the types of insights that I have about their customers that they wouldn't. What communities are they a member of? How many posts are they posting? And so I can provide intelligence about their accounts that they couldn't get otherwise. And so, being that source of content for your sellers, having a service oriented at relationship with them, having goals that matter and holding them accountable to the goals that matter, and really helping them see, working together, we move the bar and we move the number much more quickly. So when someone says to me crazy things like, I know all of you ladies have heard, how do we double pipe? Well, part of that is having sellers do more of the stuff that they should be doing, but honestly, having us do more of the things that we should be doing, and working really much more collaboratively together. So
Tom, can I weigh in on that one too?
Absolutely.
I have the experience now where we had a reorganization where we had a CMO, but she actually moved in to be a GM of one of our business units, which is great for her. But we broke up some of the marketing functions and put them in the business unit. So I actually report to the head of sales. And I like to say that in my career, I've always considered sales and marketing alignment a strength of mine. But once you're in the same organization and reporting to the same leader, I'm fond of saying the hugs got tighter and the ask got bigger. And you definitely, being part of the process with them now is with my peers who are running sales organizations and sales leaders globally, being part of their forecasting process and being part of their planning process, seeing how the sausage is made and how they get there. But the one thing, we had an incident where we had an issue with lead flow. So there was a problem with a web form passing to marketing automation, passing to Salesforce, and some leads got dropped. And the team that's responsible for that, they were like, oh, sorry. And I had to kind of back them up and say, you guys have to understand the salesperson's compensation is probably not like yours and mine. They're 50-50. So, their base salary is probably half of what yours is. And if they're not making their number, they're not feeding their family. And that's something that I think was kind of eye-opening to some of the marketers, that the compensation for sales teams is so different, and they rely on us so much for the leads, and really to take that responsibility, but also realize how critical your success is for their success. And they really want that mutual success model.
Great. Thank you for that. So let's take a few questions.
If I can just add something there, I think
Absolutely.
a couple of us have said it in different ways. And that is, wherever you are in your career, be aware of upstream and downstream from you, and what impacts you're making in your role, and anything you can do in your role to improve upstream and downstream is advantageous to you in your own career development. So, it's very important that we understand as that, carpal tunnel syndrome, sitting there working those leads, that yes, we understand the importance of that to the other individuals in our company, and that's why we're doing it, that upstream and downstream impact that we'll have.
Yeah, the other thing I would say too is there's some questions about sort of feeling like there's a wall between sales and marketing, where it's like, I want to have that engagement, but they're not letting me in the picture. They're not letting me in there. And I think that making a case for yourself to be in the planning sessions with sales, so you understand what challenges they're facing and you can be more nimble and responsive, on the marketing side to addressing those challenges. Is I will sometimes see marketing individuals who don't have the alignment they want to have with sales, but they're not willing to put the time in to really get inside the reality that sales is working through. That means participating on the forecast calls. That means listening into the challenges they're hearing. That means asking and being open to the feedback about the programs that you're pushing into it. It isn't just something you can ask them to build the bridge on. You also have to put yourself out there and engage with them on it. And I think what I've found is by doing that, I'm seen as part of the team, not another team that's part of their picture. It's sort of creates that single view of what we're all trying to accomplish, and everyone just has a different strength or different lever they're pulling to get to the same goal.
Great, thank you for that. So let's take a few questions from the audience. This one I think is a great question. What are some of the tools to see if a person you're interviewing with or for would be a good boss? Anybody want to take that?
Could always ask to speak to someone who will be a peer of the role that you're interviewing for. So someone who already has that person as a boss to see what their experience is like. Most likely, if you ask for them, they're going to pick the person that they think will say the most favorable things. But I think in terms of your own style of how you like to be managed, you can ask pointed questions. You know, how regularly are we going to be talking? How regularly are you going to check on my KPIs? You know, and there you can ask questions about what you've experienced either positively or negatively about managers in the past and try to probe about what their personality is like.
I would build on that too, Jennifer. I think you're onto something, because I think one of the things that's in that as well is you have to know yourself a bit. And so you can't go into that interview and expect that this is you just asking questions of another individual and waiting to see what they come back with. Spend a little time asking yourself, what do you want in your manager? What is the characteristics of a successful manager for you? It's not the same for everybody. So do a little bit of that self-introspection before you're in that conversation, so that you can more pointedly ask those questions and understand and envision what it would feel like to be managed by that person. I think having your ideal example of, if you've had in your past a manager that you really appreciated, or someone that you reported to that was a great fit for you, what was it about that made it a great fit? And be looking for some of those triggers. I agree. Someone responded back, I asked around and I asked another person and they lied. This boss is terrible. I think that happens. I think we'd all be lying to you if we said every boss we've ever had was a dream and it was a cakewalk the whole way through. I think when you have those difficult managers, a way that you can take back control is to try to get really formulaic about how your performance is being measured, and what the expectations are and what the measurements of those expectations are. And if you can push for some clarity there in a positive and productive way, it can put you back into a position of control, where you might feel like there's a ton of scope creep, and every time you meet with your manager, it's yeah, but, and one more thing, or you're sort of feeling like you can never be successful. One of the ways you can pull that back is to say that, to own that to your manager and say, this is what I'm feeling. Here's what I'm proposing we do to solve that. Could we set up a meeting that isn't about my tasks? This is a specific, professional meeting about my performance, your expectations of my performance, how you're measuring and judging that, so I can be sure that I'm meeting your expectations. I don't think every manager is perfect, but I think if you can build towards that, that can help you put yourself back into a feeling of control.
Thanks. And Robin, I see you're nodding your head in agreement. Anything you'd like to add to that?
I make it a practice for every new person after they interview with HR and then with me, that I have them interview with actually 5 or 6 people on my team. And that's a two-way street, where the team is measuring to see if that person would be a good fit, right, for the team. And I also tell the person, no holds barred, you can ask any question. Look, I am a acquired taste, right? Not every person who has worked for me has enjoyed that experience, right? Others keep coming back for more. So I think it's really important to be upfront, right? And understand the expectations and take advantage of interviewing with the team, as someone had mentioned.
Great. Thank you for that. So here's an interesting question from the audience. Any recommendations in breaking into the boys club? As a leader, it's often about getting the point across an amiable way. And this can be hard when you're the only woman in a boys' club. Anybody care to provide some input on that?
I'll share some advice I was given in my past on this. And one of it is if you're finding yourself in a room all the time where you feel like the only one, and there's been a couple of questions about other elements of diversity. So whether you're the only female or you're the only person of color or you're the only person who's transgender, um, when you find yourself the only other in that room, one of the things that you might be able to do is identify who could be an ally for you in that. So when taken as a whole, it could be a club of people that you don't feel like you belong to. And what can be very helpful at breaking that down and finding your voice and finding your comfort is can you identify a person in that room that could be that ally, that you could build that relationship with, that we're very pragmatically, when you feel your voice has been taken from you and you look across the room and you don't see anyone, you can see that set of eyes that helps you to restore and find that confidence. That was something that I thought was really really helpful for me in those cases.
Great. So here's a great question from the audience, and I think this raises an interesting point. When I look through the list of attendees today, it's interesting because the topic was women in marketing, but about 20% of the attendees today are men. And I think that's a good sign of where society is going, the trend. And Michael McClure asks a question in that regard. What are some of the things men can do to be allies and support women in business?
So this is Zena here. I think it's treating every woman that you encounter with like you would your sister, your cousin, or your mom, and not allowing individuals around you to treat the women in the workplace any different than you would expect your mom or your sister or your, cousin to be treated. I have some horror stories in my past, things that didn't happen to me necessarily, but happened to colleagues of mine. And they're telling me the stories that happened. And as they're telling me the story, they're saying, and Bob and Doug and Bill were standing there watching it, and none of them said anything. So I just sort of turned around and walked away because what was I going to say in that situation? This was a 26-year-old girl who was put into this situation. So I think it's just that. It's just basically speaking up. It's having the balls, if I may say that, to say in a meeting, actually, you just interrupted Jen. Let Jen finish her thought. Right? Oh, actually, Robin said that in the last meeting. Maybe we should let Robin explore that a little further now. And really consciously focusing on when your male colleagues are not treating your female colleagues like you would expect them to treat your sister. It's just really human decency at the end of the day, if I can, just be blunt about it.
That's great. Thanks for that, Zena. So here's another question about the value of advanced education. This person is currently a marketing director for a small software company, and she'd like advice to advance her career eventually to VP of marketing and finally to CMO. So her question is, what is the value? Is there any value in pursuing more advanced education, like an MBA or an MA in marketing? Is that helpful in making that transition eventually? Any thoughts on that?
I would say yes, it is. I do think that my career went up positively by getting my MBA. I was fortunate to work at a company that had tuition reimbursement, so they actually paid for my MBA, which was great. But I would say that it does make a difference. I think in the future, maybe it might not be as relevant. I would recommend an MBA versus an advanced degree in marketing. You can obviously concentrate in marketing within most MBA programs, but an MBA gives you a broader view, I think, of other functions that it's good to have an idea about, so that you can know how companies are making their goals all together.
And let's see, so a few other questions.
I would like to just add, I don't want anyone out there, though, who doesn't have the means or the capability or the opportunity to get that MBA to think that that's going to be a detriment to them either. I have a chemistry degree and I'm a vice president in marketing. So, I just, I agree with Jen 100%, by the way. So let me first say that, yes, if you have the opportunity to get your MBA, to get that advanced degree, go for it. Any opportunity that you have to get advanced training, certifications, there's a lot of good social, digital media, digital marketing programs that you can get certifications in. That's not an MBA, but it's advanced study. But don't be discouraged if you can't get that MBA, because you can still be successful without it.
Let's see. So here's an interesting question from an anonymous attendee. How do you handle being criticized for being too helpful, and that I should just let things fail sometimes? Any thought on that?
Just about to type an answer to that one. So thank you for reading it out, Tom, so I don't have to type. But I would think that the person who's telling you to just let things fail has an agenda. And I think sometimes if everyone just overstretches, overworks, is not having any work-life balance, and if everybody's always being the hero, then people get used to that as the SLA. People get used to extraordinary efforts as being the norm. So I would guess that the person who's saying let things fail is saying we're under-resourced, and if you keep accomplishing what you need, what you're being asked to accomplish that's unreasonable, then we're never going to get more resources because someone isn't experiencing the pain. So I would guess that the person who is advising someone else to just let things drop or let things fail or to say no is trying to make a case for more resources.
I 1,000% agree with what Jen said. I think she's spot on there. And I think we've all experienced that, right? Where they've cut teams down and the workload has gone up at the same time. So many of the people in marketing, the behaviors and the characteristics we talked about are just willing to take on more and more. There's a lot of questions and comments in there about that, of just feeling like my workload is unnatural or unattainable. I think the extrapolation of that is, I think Jen's right. If someone's saying let stuff fail, there's a reason for that. I think the question is, who is telling you to let that fail? And how do we want to communicate the workload challenges in a different way? Because I would say, no, don't let it fail, but still serve up the problem, right? So if you can control it, do what needs to be done first, but don't sit quietly. And I often say to my team, please don't suffer in silence. That doesn't help us in the long run. I know why you're doing it. And I know that we come at that from a very positive perspective. But if we're not serving up to the business that this isn't sustainable, we are misrepresenting to the business what resources it costs to deliver the outcome. And they think it costs X, but really it costs Y. And we need to be able to serve that up productively to the business.
If I can weigh in on that, this is such a struggle, right? And my challenge to my team has been, look at the root cause. What can we automate, right? What can you delegate? And what can we reprioritize? There are things that I ask for that I don't have a clue the work that it's going to take to create that report. So tell me. And I'm like, oh, I don't need it that bad, right? So it is this constant reprioritization. The answer cannot be no, but the answer can be a different solution, right? No, but let me try this.
Yeah, and someone's commenting, and I think a real clarity on the priorities helps you to frame that conversation, which is, okay, you've just added, I had 1 through 5 and you've just added 7 through 9. What comes off the list? I can do this, but what comes off the list? And having that priority that you work off of can help a lot.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about setting expectations. So if you don't expect that you're going to be able to get something done, you have to, you've said it before, right? Don't suffer and struggle in silence. And I agree with you, Carolyn. I think that I've had to say that to people on the team before too, that you can observe that they're kind of underwater. You're part of a team. Hopefully you're not out there alone. So even if you're overwhelmed right now, someone else might have a little bandwidth and can pick that up for you, or have done it so many times that it's not as time consuming for them to get it done. So I think that speak up is definitely part of the answer here.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, Jen. Took the words right out of my mouth. If it's a priority, there's someone to do it. It might not be you, but there's someone to do it if it's a priority.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. So here's another question that's interesting, Carolyn. I think you touched on this a little bit, is how can you advocate for minorities, for women of color, and also trans women as well?
So I wish I had the right answer to this question, because I would definitely do this for all of us and create a world where I think we have a professional industry that is completely open and does support the elements of diversity. But I think it is similar to the same answers we've been talking about, which is it does have to come from senior leadership. On the chat, one of the attendees also talks about the concept of an ERG, an employee resource group, and we've just started to form those inside Sophos, and we had a couple false starts in the past. I will be honest with you, right? Where we've tried to start, we have the Sophos Women in Technology, and we kind of tried to start it, but we didn't really have the right resources and commitment from the company's level behind it. People of color, examples like that. And I think that having a really strong advocacy at the senior management level of someone who's willing to be the sponsor of that ERG and put their name and face and business reputation behind the effort and the initiative is hugely important. And then as you build those out, really thinking about how to build that ERG into a way of pulling in inclusivity of the rest of the organization, right? What you don't want to do is double down on the concept of the other. I've heard it, I'm sure we've all heard it lots of times before. Oh, there's a women in tech event. When's the men in tech event, right? It's very quickly, you'll hear that joke kick back to you. But if you can explain it in such a way that pulls them into the conversation, as you mentioned, Tom, so many of our attendees here today are men or people with different backgrounds. And I think that is probably one of the ways to help it. I also think bringing ideas to your company. So if you're not sitting on the senior level of the staff that can enforce it from the top down or start to build it from the top down, be bringing ideas and bringing that sense of information and exposure and resources into the company from the ground up as well. I think that is actually one of the best ways we can kind of see it coming at it from both different angles. In general, I think someone said it as well when we were talking about how should men advocate for women in rooms, is be the advocate in the moment. That every time, we've all heard the commentary, we've all heard the statements, and what you have to be is find the strength and the confidence in yourself to say, hey, I'm sure you didn't mean anything by this, but I just want to give you some feedback about how that felt for the people in the room. I've had to do that several times with incredibly caring and kind and thoughtful people. What I don't do is do it in front of the crowd to further embarrass them. I go to that individual directly and say, in this moment, you made this joke. I'm sure you thought it was funny, but I don't know that you realized how it felt or was heard downstream. Thinking about ways, so if you're early in the organization, bringing some of those resources and ideas and perspective in from the top of the organization, be willing to put your face out there, stick your neck out. And then in your day-to-day, be aware and be tuned in and be willing to make a statement to someone. And you don't have to do it in a way that further isolates that person. You can do it in a way that brings them into the effort and brings them into the conversation.
I'll say, as a marketeer, one of the things that I focus on is driving that visibility of diversity in my marketing. So, when I create customer stories or when I seek speakers to present at events for us, it's very important to me that I'm looking for equality across there. And if we're going to have 3 male speakers, I try to have 3 female speakers as well. And yes, it is explicit and it is purposeful. We launched a customer advisory board, and one of the goals on the board was half female, half male. If you don't write it down and you don't make it a goal, it doesn't happen either. ERGs, we do ERGs as well. It's very important internally. But externally, I think, us as marketeers, we have the opportunity to put faces out there and to put dialects out there and to put stories out there that highlight how these underserved individuals or groups, minorities, are actually making a difference. And so really promoting them.
You know, Zena, you made me think of something too, because it can sometimes feel more obvious to be able to identify diversity when you're talking about males and females. But as we recognize diversity that might be about, sexual orientation, gender identity, et cetera, one of the things our company has done, and I'll share this with others because I hadn't thought about it before and it really touched me, was they sent out an anonymous survey for self-identification. Because, in marketing, we live by the adage, those things that are measured naturally improve. Right. And this can be one of those things that is difficult to measure. And they really took a stand and put out a survey that said, tell us who you are. Tell us, how do you like to be recognized? Tell us, something about yourself. It was anonymous and it was designed to create a baseline for us to look at ways we could, first of all, judge ourselves. How are we doing? How are we meeting our commitment, and how far off are we? And what could we do to improve that? That was something I hadn't thought about in terms of how to promote diversity. And it was a pretty cool idea.
Great, and thanks for that. So we're running low on time here. We've got about another minute left. So I just wanted to mention to everybody that we do 2 of these webinars a month that are vendor neutral webinars to enrich folks with education from leaders in different capabilities in marketing, but also sales engagement. So I did want to mention that February 25th, we have an art and science of integrated campaigns. March 18th, here's an interesting one. There's more and more people leveraging B2C principles in B2B marketing. And then March 25th, we're going to have an expert on the empathy of science and a panel of marketers that are enabling or using empathy in marketing at all steps of the funnel, from top of funnel through managing customer experience. And that gets to the next topic on April 15th, managing customer experience, the 25th, AI infused marketing. And what I'd like to say, if you're interested, you have a topic that you think would be great for our audience, for your peers, let us know that, Tom at virtualintelligencebriefing.com. And also, if you'd like to be a panelist on one of these or other upcoming webinars, that would be great. And the very last thing I wanted to mention is today at the peak, we had about 740 participants today. I want to thank everybody for that. I especially want to thank the panelists for being gracious and taking their time for this. Appreciate that very much, and I'm sure our community does as well. And just the last thing I'll say, which is a little bit of plug for VIB, is that we promote webinars for our customers and perform full service webinars as well. So we can help you in terms of level of engagement from your audience and attendees. And if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to us. So thank you very much, everybody. This has been a great session for me as well. My learning, we've got great questions. We'll get back to everybody if we haven't been able to answer the question today live. And once again, thank you very much. I guess the very last thing I'll say is that we'll be randomly drawing for people a raffle for that charity choice, $500 charity choice gift card, where you can, in your name, donate to a charity of your choice of over 1,000 different charities. So once again, thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. And thanks again to our panelists. Appreciate it, and look forward, hoping to see you on one of our upcoming webinars.